everyone to our first podcast. It's part of the Canadian GovTech community, a new initiative that Mitch and I just launched. And this is really about just, enhancing connections between technology and government.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just closing the gap between where the industry is and where the government is right now, and just trying to build connections and a community online.
Yeah. And this is something that, we've had some experience doing previously. We've done a couple of virtual events, working with post-secondaries, working with government, working with technology companies, trying to get them all basically in the same room, sharing best practices and, trends of what's going on in the technology community. And so we created this initiative really just create foster a neutral ground on which people can share best practices in education. So we've created these social media channels where we're going to be doing podcast videos, try to get the conversations going between the stakeholders.
Yeah, so feel free to check out our LinkedIn page, our Facebook page, our YouTube, because throughout the next couple months and hopefully years, we'll be posting lots on there to try and educate everyone and bring people together, and like Kevin said, start a conversation between industry, post-secondaries, and the government.
Yeah. And, I was really inspired because during COVID and the pandemic, it seems like virtual podcast, or I guess podcasting or virtual events and whatnot, have really kind of taken off and became a thing. And I was really inspired by, just before the pandemic, I was working with a company called Lighthouse Labs. And one of their employees was actually laid off as part of the just when things started going down. And she created this thing called Build Me Up Women series, or Build Up Women series. I should probably know exactly what it's called. But anyway, so she was extremely consistent and did these podcasts all about, empowering women. And she was consistent every 2 weeks or so. She was doing these podcasts, and it's turned into an amazing community. I mean, she's got a bunch of followers now, and it's turned into a fantastic organization. So, I think that's what we're trying to achieve here, is just kind of like being consistent and pumping out content and uniting the community through, a fairly consistent initiative. So today, we have a guest to kind of talk about community, François Levesque, who is a co-founder of Apartment 613, which was an organization in Ottawa that's all about fostering community around culture, arts. So I was actually introduced to Apartment 613 through a colleague of mine, and we got plugged into an initiative called Ottawa's Best Amateur Gardener, which is all about showcasing gardens in Ottawa. But it's a really great organization because it's all volunteer based. And it's just I mean, we're going to learn all about it today, but it really trends into what we're doing because Francois already went through the experience of building community. So we're going to kind of pick his brain today and see if we can get some best practices and some advice on how we can make this easier on us as we try to build this thing.
Hey guys, it's an honor to be here for your first show, and look forward to the chat.
Yeah. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Apartment 613. I was talking to my partner, Kat, last night about it. And her first question was like, number one, where did you get the name from? Yeah. So maybe you can give us a bit of a story of like, how this came to be. And also give it like, where did the title come from? Exactly.
Sure. So for those that don't know, Apartment 613 is an Ottawa-centric, community-driven organization. We're not-for-profit now, and the main thing that we do is a website called apt613.ca, and it's something, as you said, that's community-driven, where we have anything from 20 to 30 active volunteer contributors. Those can be writers, photographers, folks that help with social media. And we've been around for over a decade now. We started informally, towards the end of 2008, and picked up steam in 2009, incorporated as a not-for-profit in 2010, and then really grew from there to the point where now, while it's still very much community driven, we have 3, 4, sometimes even 5 part-time staff that are supporting the endeavor. So what we do and what our mantra was really to try and cover some of the lesser known events and artists and happenings that take place in Ottawa and Gatineau. Back in the day, there were a few other publications that were out there, paper and online, and things like the Ottawa Citizen and the Sun probably had bigger art sections, and they were good at covering things like Blues Fest or Jazz Fest or Winterlude, but a lot of things did not get the coverage that we thought they deserved. And so, we decided to take a crack at it ourselves. In some of our pre-chats, guys, I was telling you that I had worked abroad, and I was just coming to Ottawa. It was a new city to me. I came here because of a girl, and we're still together now. And she was a public servant at the time, and had a bit more of a community of friends than I had. But, it was at a time where we could still go out. And one of the places she introduced me to was the Manx, a nice little watering hole on Elgin, for those that don't know, that I look forward to going back to when we can. But it was a group of people there that had different interests, but we kind of connected. Someone had their personal blog at the time. One person was a bit more of a techie, one was a journalist. I was jobless and had lots of time. And so, the way we started was, we came together in our apartment, and we all lived in apartments. So you're maybe getting a clue of how we got this name, but I'll get to that a little bit later. But basically, we brainstormed around what we could do, and how we could cover these events, and we just said, let's just pitch in and see. Let's all write one article, once a week over a month, all of us, to try and get a body of work together and see if we like it and if we can sustain it. And we built a really simple website. At the time, WordPress was around and was fairly accessible. So you didn't need to be, a super techie to develop a website. So we developed a very simple blog template that's actually still there. If you go to apt613.wordpress.com, I believe it's still around. But from there, we just started writing. It was around the time of the OC Transpo bus strike, so there were a few articles about that. And the stories that we wrote about were very, very personal at the time, very opinion based on our lives of, mid-20s something. And still, to go back to the name, Apartment 613, obviously it resonates a little bit because 613 is the area code, or the main area code in the city. Apartment, well, really, it was just because we were all living in apartments at the time. And yes, we did, look at different names. We almost called it Larry, and that was based on Larry O'Brien, who was our mayor at the time. We almost called it By the By because of the byword market. I think we dodged a bullet there, and Apartment 613 is something that still resonates to this day, even through a few iterations of the website and through growth over a decade.
And from the original people that started it, is anyone still involved in it? Or how did it because it seems to me like a new generation is taking it on. So what did that kind of transition look like?
Yeah, well, at this point in time, I think all of the co-founders have transitioned out. So it is a whole new generation. I was probably the one that stayed on the longest. until fairly recently, I was a member of the board and I was board chair. But I had been less involved in the day-to-day workings of it. So, when we first started, we did all of it ourselves. We were the writers, we were the editors, and when we incorporated, while this is probably not a best practice, we were a small organization and we were the ones that were most implicated in it. So we put ourselves as board members, at least temporarily. For me, though, it just meant that I was a board member for about 10 years. so a few years ago, with family and work responsibilities growing, I just decided to take more than a leave of absence, but just step down from the board and give a chance to others to contribute. But for different reasons, people came and left. Part of the organizers, some moved to different cities, some just got jobs that became too demanding to be able to volunteer. Others, were just not as interested anymore. So, things move on, but it is a little bit because we had big numbers at the start that I think we were able to sustain it at the beginning and keep going and keep building that community that went beyond us, which I think is a key thing, right? I've seen a lot of people, take a stab and, be one or two people, and they often do it, on top of their regular day jobs and family lives, and it can be quite a lot. Power in numbers is definitely something that we benefited from there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes to mind when you say that is I've always been really impressed with Apartment 613 in terms of like how engaged their audience is. So is there anything that you really attribute to that engagement? Because I mean, that is one of the keys to this whole community building, is to, well, get the community involved.
Yeah. Well, it always blows my mind when I look at some of our social media numbers and our hits. But, we are, local, some would say hyper local. We cover different neighborhoods in the city, but we don't, yes, we cover stuff in Aylmer or, things at the Black Sheep Inn, for example. So it's not just Ottawa, but still our geographic region is fairly limited. So, while somebody in Toronto might pick up on an article that we've written and see some interest in it, it's really for folks that are in the NCR, in the National Capital Region. So the fact that, we have over 54,000 people following us on Twitter, that our social media, Instagram is probably in the tens of thousands. I haven't looked at it too recently, but and that growth over the past decade has been sustained is pretty impressive. And I think, we are responsive. So on social media, it almost sounds naive, and it goes back to, some of the early days of Twitter where you try to build a bit of a conversation with your audience. But I think we're still pretty good at doing that. And in some ways, it's maybe because we, a large majority of the time, stay away from overly controversial subjects, or if we do, we try to, put a positive spin on it. So we're not there to attack anyone, and we're not there to create controversy. But because people view us as, I guess, maybe eternal optimists, or folks that want to shine a light on the positives of Ottawa, I think it's been easier in that sense to build that sense of community. And of course, with our writers as well, who are really the ones that keep this thing going. We are pitch friendly. So if you've got an idea, come to us. And it's pretty rare that we'll say no. if people want to volunteer, we want to make sure that they get something out of it as well. We benefit from it and we get content, but for them, it might be, a creative outlet, or it might be you're a journalism student and you want experience writing, or, you want to explore an artistic genre that you haven't been exposed to. So we try to make sure that our editors and other, maybe more experienced volunteers get to work with newer people so they can get something out of it as well. One of the things we haven't been able to do recently because of COVID, but I think that's a good practice, is bringing people together. So it is a virtual community, and readership extends to that. But I think for us, it's really been important to build a community with our volunteers. So regularly we used to have meetups where people would come together, maybe meet for the first time and say, hey, I read your article about so and so, and I thought that was really interesting. Or, hey, would you like to collaborate on, a local brewery series or something like that? And so, and through those initiatives and those meetings, I think a few neat series have come up. We found some staff that have been key to our growth over the years, and people find a sense of belonging as well. Another way we've engaged people is this is something we did for the first time last year, and it was a little bit inspired by the Dundies. And and so we just called it the Bloggies, and because we couldn't meet up, every year on June 13th, it's our fake anniversary, because it's June 6th, 6 months, and 13th 1-3. So that's what we picked as our fake birthday, and we usually throw a big live birthday, but we couldn't do that. So we held the Bloggies last year and gave out a bunch of prizes to volunteers. And so I, just as a thank you for everything they've done.
Yeah, you touched on quite a few things here, which are actually very helpful in terms of like as we kind of get started here. Like, I think we're trying to achieve the same thing that you guys did with the audience, where you build a big enough audience up that you can start to do these creative things, right? The pitches, the meetups, the series, the themes. Kind of curious, like how long did it take you to build up that mass? I mean, the Apartment 613 mass is like extremely impressive. It's honestly one of the largest followers in Ottawa in terms of like the LinkedIn and Twitter presence. So like how long did it take you guys to like build up to like a significant grouping of people where you could do, things? How long did that take?
You're making me dig back here to like more than a decade, but I would say, in 2009, 2010, it was really us, and it was a small group, and we were just starting, and it was probably 5 or 6 of us. But some people started noticing that we had a bit of a presence, and we were covering neat stuff. And I think one key step in growing our audience was a first partnership that we had with the National Arts Center, where they were like, oh, you guys do cool stuff, and we'd like to offer you some tickets to cover some of our things, and possibly advertise with you down the line. And I think they already had a bit of a presence online and helped amplify our own presence there. And I think that opened some doors, or was able to shine a light on Apartment 613 and just some folks that didn't know about us and checked us out for the first time. That was really neat. I think another one, another partnership that we were able to establish fairly early on. I forget exactly the year, but it was with the Ottawa Fringe Festival. So, you'd think, we are just a bunch of younger people that got involved in Apartment 613, but there's a whole range of people, and there's actually a few folks that are retired and are dedicated to covering the arts in Ottawa. And I think particularly of Brian Carroll and his partner Barb Popple. And they have been we discovered them and partnered with them for the first time through the Fringe, and they've covered theater for us for the last several years. They've hosted some Apartment 613 meetups at their place. And so they've been really great contributors. So, when we first started the blog, when we first started Apartment 613, I wouldn't have thought necessarily that we would have captured such a broad swath of age groupings and interests in terms of our volunteers. But we have. And so I think that general openness is, and as long as, you believe in the ethos of Apartment 613 and, the good the community can do and I think that has been super impressive. And I guess it's probably some growth in myself in seeing how it's evolved.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great to hear about how it's kind of evolved exactly. And one of the things that like comes to mind for me is social media changes so fast and it's ever evolving. And I know you've mentioned in previous conversations and earlier in this conversation about your Twitter following and how key that was, and how you were kind of with Twitter, kind of building as Twitter kind of built up and grew. So looking at it today, where do you think the majority of your influence is now? Is it still in Twitter, or are you seeing a shift into different avenues in terms of social media and producing, whether it be podcast or webinars or even YouTube videos? And where would you go if you had to start today?
So one of the things I didn't talk about at first is how we tried to dabble in a few different ways to build up the community through different avenues, and that included a radio show on CHUO. It included in-person events, like learning series. But one of the challenges that I found, and I think that's okay, is that these one-off initiatives, and they weren't one-offs in terms of just one event, but these separate series are often based on the desire of one or two people to do something different, and they can sustain it for a little while, and because of different circumstances in their lives, they move on. And if you want that to continue past that one or two people, then you need to train up people or build that interest early on. And so I found, so the radio show went through a couple of different hosts and a couple of different iterations where we had live radio shows at first, and then they were recorded, and then they were weekly, and then they became bi-weekly. And so so we just weren't able to put the effort in to sustain it in a way that we contributed sufficiently. And I think that's okay. You just need to know when something's not working and pull the plug, or have a good exit strategy, or a good exit ramp strategy. So, you don't build up and build up and build up your audience, and then poof, one day you're not there, and people wonder why, and they want to listen to you or they want to see you. Um, yeah, but back to your question around, social media and what we might be doing differently now, or um, I think the folks that are running Apartment 613 now are pretty focused. Twitter seems to be, still the main avenue to share articles. Obviously, Facebook is a big one too, and Instagram as well. We do have a YouTube channel. I don't know if you should consider YouTube as social media or just media, but whatever, let's consider it social media. But it's an avenue for us to produce new content as well. And it's because we have a few people that want to do video content. But as we've discussed in the past, it does take a lot of time and work to do video properly. And so this is almost more like, not like a pilot project because it's been around for a little while still, but our social media is run more at the editorial level. So it's our employees that do it rather than our volunteers. And so I think they're taking a wise approach to not spreading themselves too thin. And as far as I know, the big three are Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And, through those three, we're able to amplify the work of our contributors and also amplify the work of, or it's not necessarily even the work of, but but showcase neat photos of in Instagram and happenings through Twitter. So I think they're taking a wise approach there.
You're 100% on the money though, in terms of like really picking the ones you want to focus on and doing them well and engaging with your audience really well on them. And I think that's something that we have really kind of thought about, and where our audience is and where they engage. And so that's where we came up with, I think LinkedIn is going to be one of our main drivers through this whole thing, because it's a very professional audience, it's professional networking. And we really want to provide people value that they can take to their jobs and help them through the tech sector, basically.
Yeah. I feel like LinkedIn has a lot of like potential for disruption too. Like on LinkedIn, you see a lot of static content, but I think we're envisioning a lot of like more, a lot of live events being broadcasted live on LinkedIn where the community can get engaged directly, a lot of video content, so I think we're looking to shake up the content a little bit on LinkedIn. You mentioned a lot of other interesting points around the importance of getting more people involved. Of course, like Mitch and I are committed and going to put lots of time and effort into building this thing. But it's a good warning that you give, though, in terms of like, we're all humans after all. So the more people that get involved, the better, So I was thinking about even like, interns in the summertime or something like that, just to kind of like get people trained up and get others kind of like plugged in, The other aspect you talked about was consistency. And that's, we've been talking a lot about like various themes, various outlooks that we can do on a fairly consistent basis. But, the other area we were thinking about and could use some of your advice on is like, on our LinkedIn and on our various social media platforms and whatnot, like how much of the content that we're pumping out can come from the community itself, and like from an Apartment 613 standpoint, I mean, at one point, I'm sure you had lots of options, right? In terms of people coming to you with content. It's like, how much of that content that you're posting is coming directly from your organization, and how much of it is coming from, the community itself?
Yeah, well, we've never taken really we've taken a thoughtful approach to it, but I don't think we've very explicitly written down our approach to it. So it's almost like a gut feeling. And, we've never shied away from resharing something that an individual has done. And over the years, I think at first, we were a little bit territorial and saying, we wouldn't reshare something from a competitor or something like that. But I think even over the years, we've kind of said, screw it, the community is not big enough, and let's all try to survive and thrive. And so we do share things when I think they align well with our values. And so even from competitors, we're okay with sharing some of that content and guiding back to other websites at the end of the day. And another thing that you mentioned around consistency, I think it's good for you guys to establish a rhythm and a good pace, but at the same time, and I think this is one of the things that I really liked when I contributed more as a writer to Apartment 613 is having that scoop and having that, be the first one out with a story, even if it's just a short story. But, I'd often come across something just walking on the street and say, oh, there's a new shop opening up there, and I know people will be introduced, super interested about it. So I'll just snap a picture with my phone, get home and write a short story and publish it right away. And obviously with a podcast, I mean, you maybe cannot do that so instantaneously, but if there's something that's, important and big that's happening in your community, try to carve out some time to do a quick podcast and then put it out in the ether, in a timely way. So you don't have to wait, till your next week, and then it's kind of out of the news cycle. I know that's not always possible to do, but I've seen, bigger podcasting organizations do that, and it always grabs my attention because I see it, on my Spotify, it pops up, and I'm like, okay, I should listen to this now because it's timely, it's useful, either to my own personal interests or to my work. So that might be something useful for you guys to consider.
Yeah, I think we're definitely gonna do that kind of stuff. It'll be interesting because like the sector we're covering, technology and government, is so niche, But like there's developments in government all the time that would be relevant to technology companies, whether you're a startup or if you're a big firm, right? Like the budgets come out. I mean, you're basically tracking government newsmaking, just like everyone else, right? But you just taking a really specific angle on it with technology. So, in the budgets that would come out, we often do see like investments going into technology. So we would like cover that kind of stuff on the fly, I would think. And I think we will also try to get some contributors every once in a while so we can interview those who are like experts on it. So I'm not sure how big the technology community is in Canada. That would be interesting, this stuff. I find that like startups are interested in government from like a funding and grants and like procurement perspective, but like only in the periphery. You know what I mean? So I feel like as we keep going and people like more proactively reach out to us and want to get involved, we'll be able to do those like pop up on the fly sessions more seamlessly. You know what I mean? I think it'd be probably a little challenging at the start. We're relying on a lot of like good faith and friendships to get going here, just to get it going. But I hope that it gets to a point where it's like Apartment 613, where like, contributors and content providers are reaching out to us, and that, the problem might be we have too much content to consider, you know?
And you say you're fairly niche, but I wonder, it's niche in Canada, but there's perhaps an international market, and perhaps an international audience, and there's maybe some international experts that can come in too and speak to their own reality in the US, the UK, or wherever, because I'm sure that niche community exists in other countries too, and they might have an interesting perspective that we haven't considered here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of tech startups worldwide that are really interested in doing work with the Canadian government, and they just don't even know where to start sometimes. And so even if we can give them at least a little snippet of maybe where to start or where to go look for the information, I think that would go a long way in terms of providing value to individuals that might not be able to go hire the $20,000 a month lobby firm in Ottawa here. So I think part of our goal is to provide real value to individuals that want to get a foot in the door, whether it's Canadian based or international based, and whether that be through like discussing the whole ITB program in Canada, or whether discussing procurements of tech and how to get involved if you're an international company or a small startup. I think that would go a long way in bringing in people that have done it before, and getting their thoughts on it. So we'd really love to build like maybe a small series around that kind of style thing. So
Yeah, I feel like the more government gets involved, the better too.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, the government are the real authorities on if you want to do business with government, right? Like we can provide advice and guidance and whatnot, but like they're the true experts and they're the true insiders that know, right? And in the past, we have been successful in getting government involved. Like I think they're keen to get the message out, and you often see like governments departments, even like I saw ESDC launch their own podcast around talent and training in government. So I think they're trying to get it out. But like I think what we're trying to achieve here that's a little different is like we want to make it as real as possible. And sometimes when the government do announcements or messaging, like they're so, and you would know, I mean, you work in government, Francois, so they're kind of like they have to operate within the frame. They have to operate within rules and regulations, right? Which is fine. But like I find that it kind of makes the conversation like not as organic, and I feel like what we're trying to achieve here is like as an organic conversations we're having right now, because I feel like that is what will be interesting to people. Like they don't want to sit there and watch like a slide deck going through. I mean, I'm sure we'll do some slides every once in a while kind of thing, but like I feel like they'll get more out of it when we have a CIO or a politician and we're just asking them like real questions, like what do you want to achieve and how do you want to achieve it, and like what are you noticing out there, like where do you see the opportunities for startups? You know what I mean? So that's what we're really trying to get through. And I don't think you don't really see that too much. Like you do have the IT associate, ITAC or Tech Nation, which is the association there. But like even they with their content, not to criticize or anything, but it's not open. You know what I mean? Like it's internal, it's a membership based organization. And going into this, we're trying to avoid that completely. We want all our content to be available to everyone, because I think that will encourage more participation. It's not a closed door, but it's available to like the ecosystem generally speaking, whether it's international or domestic,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I mean this openness and this notion of openness. When we first started Apartment 613, I think we maybe didn't understand this fully, but around copyright but we basically made everything available through Creative Commons. So if somebody wanted to something published in Apartment 613 and republish it somewhere else, we were generally okay with it because we thought it would be a good idea just to get the word out there about the particular thing that we were covering. Your approach to openness, but in the context of a business and seeing where that goes.
Yeah. So like, it's funny too, because like the frame could just keep on expanding and expanding, right? Like, we could do like a series of podcasts where we get government folks talking about their projects and priorities. And then we could get like blog posts before and after, we can get like various feedback articles around, industries, feedback to, projects going on within government. So it's going to be interesting to see how, like what Mitch and I can do ourselves. And then, how many people we'll have to drag in here to make sure that, we can maintain consistency and good quality content,
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we want to be consistent, but we also want to provide value with each piece of content we put out. As I mentioned, I think there's a real demand for valuable content that the door's really shut on right now, especially in the tech sector in Canada.
Mm-hmm. And I'm definitely not an expert either. So like, I feel like the more people don't need to hear from me, the better kind of thing. In previous initiatives, we had post-secondary involved. And like when you get, an expert on cybersecurity from a post-secondary perspective and someone from industry together, then you can have a really interesting discussion, right? Beyond the frame of what you would typically hear,
Yeah, I think, like Kevin said, we want to moderate those conversations so that we're there to put them together and create them and make them happen, for everybody listening, more than just hearing from Mitch and Kevin talking to everyone. So I think that will really help people not only hear our perspectives, but industry's perspective and post-secondary's perspective of where Canada's going with cyber tech, everything, digital transformation, especially through COVID and everything. We've all seen the digital transformation age kind of come up in a really new and interesting way. So tagging on to that, I think it's going to be really interesting to hear how different people have really attacked digital transformation.
That's true. Like all the governments right now are trying to like offer their services better or better offer their services to the citizens, right? And during COVID, when all the provinces and federal governments had to suddenly offer these benefits to people, easily in a way that was easy for them to access, I think it made them realize very quickly. And you're seeing that in Ontario, you're seeing that in BC, even federally. It's like they have to like rapidly upgrade the technology that they're using to offer these services, right? So, in the Ontario budget federally, there was money set aside for this stuff, and it's an interesting time as we've watched Canadian governments kind of pivot to the post-COVID world.
Yeah, well, but yeah, post-COVID world, yeah, it'll be super interesting from listening to your guests over the coming weeks talk about the disruption of COVID and how, you talk about the different approaches that provinces and territories have taken, to things like, signing up for vaccination, and you compare Quebec with Ontario to other provinces, and how, someone compared the Ontario system to the Hunger Games, and Nova Scotia was the easiest thing ever. And so people, they take different approaches for different reasons with different levels of successes, and it'll be interesting to see, if that has big enough implications down the road when election times come around. It's maybe a small part of it, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what parties, and I know you guys may not get into politics so much, but what parties are unscathed from their time managing the pandemic and the recovery, and who might get sunk because of this.
Mm-hmm. And it's something like Apartment 613, you guys did some stuff around like they call them neighborhood wars at one point, but like contrasting and comparing neighborhoods in Ottawa, and that was inspiring to me with this series because Canada has 10 provinces, 3 territories, right? And we can do a lot of interesting things around comparing and contrasting the various elements of how the provinces compare against each other, right? I wouldn't call it, we're not going to do like provincial wars, but the same idea though, right? Where you can there's so much going on, and they take such different approaches. Imagine getting someone from Ontario and someone from Alberta in the same room, or someone from Alberta and Quebec, and compare and contrast their approaches to digital transformation, sharing best practices. Like you don't really see that often, where you get the. I mean, I'm sure that happens behind the doors. The provinces certainly talk to each other, but it's not public. For the vast majority of those conversations, at least.
Kevin's point around getting those provincial and territorial comparisons, and having people that can, either that can compare BC to Ontario or give both those perspectives, or getting someone or 2 people from the same jurisdiction to talk about, well, from my perspective, this is what I saw worked well, and then the other guy disagrees, and you can get interesting discussions going that could maybe lead to some type of idea of a compromise, because ultimately, we're a country where federalism rules, and you need to compromise to get anything done. So that could lead to some super interesting discussions, I think,
Yeah,
on COVID and other topics.
yeah, you could do like a, when the pandemic is over, hopefully sooner than later, you could have a whole series of interviewing, public servants or politicians around like COVID reflections, like, because like they're like, it is intense, if you're an executive in government right now or a politician, like they have not stopped in like a year and a half now. And it's, and there's still, there's an end in sight, but there's still lots to, a long way to go. So, after like they have a chance to kind of decompress, and if they're still around, because you are seeing some people exit at this point, like burning out, right, in government, to have those like reflections, like what did you learn, what worked, what didn't work, what context could have been different that would have helped you out. If you had a system in place, if cloud services had been widely adopted in government, would that have made this whole thing? I'm sure it would have. It made it a lot easier. But to get those perspectives from the government, but also from the technology folks, right? Because they're the ones. A lot of the times, they're the ones delivering the projects, right?
Yeah, and ultimately something like this or similar to this will happen again. SARS came around how many years ago? Maybe a decade less. I don't know. I forget. I still remember seeing images of SARS Fest in my head. But all that to say, it's something similar will happen again. So if we can be better prepared from a tech perspective, then that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we've also seen a lot of things change in terms of efficiency through COVID. I mean, some of these digital systems, yes, they allow us to work from home, etc., but they also really help with the efficiency of government in times. Whether it's companies and governments upgrading their hardware to upgrading software so that employees and officials can work from home effectively and have a better work-life balance even. So I think the change after COVID, this post-COVID world we're soon, hopefully, knock on wood, going to be entering into is going to be really interesting in terms of how effective and how efficient our services are afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like if things change so like especially in technology, right, it just exponential change, and the governments today are still adjusting to what it was like in the 90s, right? And they're just like getting used to cloud services, starting to adopt it, looking at the opportunities that opens up. But perhaps by the time that cloud services are adopted in government, it's like, okay, well, that's old, that's old school now. We're moving to the next thing, quantum or whatever it is. So we could do a whole other series on like technology outlook. What's the world gonna be like in 2030? You know what I mean? And then get a bunch of different, academics, technology, government involved and say, okay, well, cloud services will be here for like 5 years, but they're going to move into the next thing, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting how, governments like that container ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal where, well, maybe that's the stereotype and correct me if I'm wrong, but slow moving and can get stuck and takes forever to get back on track and so but I know that's not always the case, and some people can adapt really quickly and bring solutions that are useful super quickly. So it'll be interesting to get those good examples and lessons learned that can be scaled up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Oh, sorry, Mitch. I'm hoping that this is a really fun initiative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Mitch and I were talking back and forth the other day about all this and like the outlook, and it's like, let's make it. Mitch was like, or I said to him, I hope this is gonna be enjoyable and fun. And he's like, well, if it's not enjoyable and fun, then we're not gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the keys to this is if it's interesting and we're making it fun, and then it will be more fun to listen to. And I think some of these topics can sometimes be a bit dry. So bringing, like Kevin said, a different light to it. I mean, on LinkedIn, we're not going to be publishing long paragraphs or white papers that you have to go dig through to find. We're going to publish a quick video that will give you the synopsis of that 700-page budget document, so you at least have a place to start with some of this stuff. So making it interesting, making it entertaining, so we provide values to our listeners and keep them coming back. Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
So tell me, guys, outside of so you've got the podcast. Are you planning a website, or is your main publication vehicle going to be LinkedIn for things like short articles or videos?
Yeah, so we have LinkedIn, obviously, where you can find all of our content. We'll post links to where you can find our podcast, our videos on YouTube, etc. But in the next coming days, actually, we're going to be launching our final version of our website. So on our website, it will guide you to where the different pieces of information are, whether it be our podcast, which you can find across basically any major podcast platform once we launch, and our YouTube link, where we'll be hosting, as Kevin said, a lot of live events to really up the engagement, make it interesting, get people involved. And LinkedIn will be the home for a lot of our posts, as you said, and this ties right back into that comment about getting that scoop and being first to write about it. That's where you'll see our LinkedIn really thrive, where we'll put in a lot of effort in terms of getting the value to you as soon as we find out about that piece of information.
One last question for you, because maybe we can wrap up on this one. Like, I think eventually we're going to do a lot of like in-person events too. I feel like after COVID, people are going to want to get together, you know? So like, but of course, like there's also the virtual content too, which is like, it's easier to make, right? Like it's easier to interview someone over Zoom or whatnot, and than necessarily to meet up in person and then interview them. I mean, you know, that's one example, but virtual events are much easier too, I find, and you can reach a larger audience than typically like an in-person event. You know, like where do you guys think like the desire will, you know, will exist in not society, but like in maybe in Ottawa, for instance, around, you know, events and versus, you know, virtual stuff. Like, do you think there'll still be an appetite for virtual content and podcasts like going forward after COVID? Or do you think that people are just going to be like, nah, let's meet in person? You know, I miss that, you know, that one-on-one kind of interaction.
Well, you know, I think that a lot of people will have a desire for in-person meetups, you know, not having you know, not being able to see your friends, your family, your coworkers for over a year. You know, I think people will want that, definitely. um, in terms of organizing events, you know, Apartment 613 has organized some really successful events, some real clunkers too, where, you know, we didn't have a lot of people show up for whatever reason, you know, whether it's a topic that we thought would have a lot of interest, but it didn't really, or, you know, it's just a rainy day and people don't want to go out. So it, you know, there's various reasons for why an in-person event is less successful. But and you're right that an in-person event, you know, it's so much more organization, and maybe one piece of advice for you guys is, you know, sure, if you want to if you want to have a showcase event that's related to you specifically, that's good. You know, you can do maybe 2 or 3 a year, but there's probably lots of opportunities for you guys to bring value to an existing event that's in your community, you know, whether it's you know, a conference that is on a topic that you guys cover, or, you know, you mentioned ITAC earlier, and they probably have something, maybe it's in Ottawa, maybe it's not, but, you know, is there an opportunity for you guys to be there and cover it in a way? And maybe you're there through your jobs already, but, you know, maybe you could do, you know, you could take that opportunity to take an hour there and do a podcast, because you're going to have a big audience, and a lot of potential people that may want to speak on your podcast. So take opportunity of those existing events, so you don't have to do all of the legwork to organize an event, and you can just kind of show up and do your thing and kind of amplify the message that way.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Kevin and I have talked about too is even just to get a start with the live events. I think what we'll probably end up doing is a bit of a hybrid. So we'll live stream it for those who might not be comfortable or can't make it in person, and they can join us virtually. And then for the small number that can make it in person, we'll host them, and we'll, as you said, get them up on whether it be a stage or sit around the table and chat, and get all these very unique perspectives on tech in government in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this was episode 1. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Francois. We'll see where this leads to, but it's funny because you started your organization department, and here we are in my apartment starting our initiatives. So we have we have a lot in common, I find. But I think if there's one example that I think we aspire to be, I think Apartment 613 was an excellent. What would you even call that? It's just like a good objective to get to. We can achieve what you were able to achieve over the past decade, obviously on different topics, but the audience, the reputation, the respect, the trust that you generated, I think that would be, ideal. It's kind of the North Star to pursue.
Yeah, exactly. And we thank you so much for joining us on this first adventure of an episode and seeing where this takes us. And definitely, if for any of our listeners, go check out Apartment 613 if you're in the Ottawa area or the capital region, because it's an awesome organization and a great spot to find things to do. Or in the virtual world, I know you guys highlighted some great takeout spots too. So if you're looking for takeout, that's a good spot to check out.
Yeah, and if you have a nice garden, keep an eye out for the Apartment 613 website, because they are eventually, I think in the next week or so, going to be accepting registrations for Ottawa's best garden. So keep an eye out for that too. So thank you, Francois, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, and long life to the podcast and to the organization. I look forward to seeing it grow, and look forward to hearing the next few episodes too. Cheers.
Thank you.